If you've ever gone looking for help with limerence or with obsessive love online, you've probably ended up in a very strange corner of the internet. On one side, you have people like me, I'd say I fit squarely in this first camp, saying things like, limerence is a problem. This is an addiction and it's draining your life. It's derailing it, in fact, or at the very least, it's hindering you in a substantial way. Please get help, or let's figure out how we can help you to move forward from this. On the other side, you have a lot of twin flame, divine union, soulmate love content where people are very clearly describing what may very well in reality be limerence, but they're framing it as the highest form of love, the highest form of spiritual union with another person. And they'll tell you that this kind of connection is rooted in the most beautiful kind of soul or spiritual compatibility, and that no other relationship can compare to one that begins with this level of intensity. And if one limerent connection doesn't work out, the message is often that the only real solution to letting go of one limerent object that you're currently stuck obsessing and ruminating over is to find another person who triggers the same level of limerence in you, and then hope that this time it turns into an actual relationship. And because it's very hard to harness a vague or hot and cold and often impossible bond into an actual day-to-day relationship, there are usually programs and readings and coaching sessions on offer to help you navigate your twin flame journey, or to bring your runner into union, or finally close the cycle in this lifetime. Now, before we go on, I'll tell you why I'm not a fan of going down that road. It's not because I think romance is awful or that you should stop believing in soulmates. Limerence, like I've said in previous videos, can turn into a relationship. Sometimes it does just that. The reason I speak more from this is a problem side is because if you are on YouTube looking up limerence videos and you've landed on mine, it's not because limerence turned into a great relationship for you and you're just casually curious. It's unlikely that that's the scenario. If it had turned into a good relationship and you were happy, you wouldn't be here. You'd be out there living your life with your partner. You wouldn't be spending your free time watching me talk about obsessive love on the internet. So I assume that most of you who end up here are in a pretty serious situation of, I'm addicted to another human, I can't stop thinking about them, I can't move on with my life, and I need a bit of help getting out of this. And with that in mind, I try to steer you in a direction that will actually help you. And listen, I'm not disagreeing that the feelings of limerence are euphoric. They are sublime, truly. So I'm not arguing that it doesn't feel absolutely incredible. It can really feel like you found your soulmate or your twin flame or your cosmic missing piece, whatever language you want to use. In fact, the problem is that it so often feels exactly like that. But there's a problem in there. There's a little hiccup. Telling a whole world of limerent people who are often already attachment wobbly and maybe a little bit trauma shaped, that the only romantic life worth having is one that feels like catching lightning in a tiny jar is like handing people jam-sized mason jars and saying, the only acceptable love is catching a bolt of lightning in this. Go out there and get it done. And if you haven't managed it yet, just keep running around in thunderstorms until you do. I would not give that kind of advice to people I actively dislike because it can result in you wasting your entire life waiting for this elusive lightning in a bottle feeling to strike again. So today I want to talk about why this message of divine love is so seductive, why it keeps you stuck for years, and what those soulmate twin flame feelings are actually about. Without trashing spirituality, I also consider myself spiritual, and without pretending that your feelings are meaningless or non-existent, because they're not. Hi, I'm Madalena, and this is You Reclaimed. Around here, we talk about how the lasting effects of childhood trauma, of anxiety, and of emotionally chaotic early environments shape the way we do love and relationships, and how we slowly take our lives back so that we can actually live on our own terms. If you've ever secretly thought, if it doesn't feel like limerence, then it doesn't count, this video is definitely for you. So who is the lightning in a bottle message actually for? Let's get one thing out of the way so that we are on the same page for this video. I can't sit here and tell you that limerent connections never turn into relationships. They absolutely do under the right circumstances. Sometimes two people are both limerent. They're both able to and happy to have a relationship. They're living in the same reality of what that relationship looks like. Very important. And something real forms out of that beautiful intensity of limerence. And then they have to do the very unmagical work of building an ordinary relationship once the high of limerence wears off, which it eventually does. Sometimes only one person is limerent, and even that can turn into a relationship too. But again, only under the right circumstances. Those circumstances have to include both willingness and ability to have a relationship from both people. No exceptions, at least none that I can think of. Because guess what? Limerence turning into a relationship has to follow the same rules as any other non-limerent connection turning into a relationship. Ability and willingness from both people is kind of baked into the whole relationship contract. At least it is in the free world, where we're free to engage or not engage in relationships. So what we're going to talk about here today is the idea that because limerence can sometimes work out, it's debatable just how often, everyone across the board should keep chasing that level of chemistry and intensity as the only standard for real love. That's where this idea truly becomes dangerous. Because who are we usually talking about when we talk about limerence? A lot of the time, we're not talking about securely attached people who just happen to fall really hard and really obsessively this one time. Yes, that can be the case, but not most of the time. The majority of the people who end up in full-blown limerence that doesn't resolve itself reasonably are already carrying some mix of attachment wounds, a nervous system that's already used to emotional highs and lows and is now looking for that, histories of one-sided relationships or neglect or intermittent attention in relationships, those trauma bond types of connections that are already sticky and that leave lasting and painful emotional scars. And the research lines up with this. Limerence is often described as an involuntary state of obsessive, intrusive attachment to one person, usually someone unavailable. And the whole thing operates a lot like a behavioral addiction. So when you encourage this particular group of people to only respect and strive for love that feels like a spiritual lightning strike, you're not exactly giving neutral advice. It's like telling a room full of people who are already vulnerable to getting hooked on the rush of gambling, look, the only way to build a good life is for you to keep playing until you win big. Let's talk about magical thinking next, which I think is the really meaty content of a lot of limerent episodes, and maybe what really sets limerence apart from a regular crush, or from an unrequited infatuation that would otherwise cool off naturally. What exactly is magical thinking? What does this even mean in everyday language? Very simply, magical thinking is what happens when your brain starts wrapping ordinary experiences, day-to-day life experiences, in a mystical story of some kind. And this is, again, really common in limerence. Coincidences start to feel like signs. Timing feels fated. Of course, I had no choice but to meet this person. Of course, the universe brought us together at this particular time. The intensity of your feelings becomes part of the proof that this connection must be led by destiny, not just a very powerful psychological and neurochemical state. And just to say this clearly, there's nothing inherently wrong with magical thinking. There's nothing wrong with looking for hidden purpose or significance in difficult, in sublime, or intense experiences. Most humans do this. In a lot of ways, it's how we make meaning out of the hard and the beautiful things that happen to us. magical thinking can also help us cope. In the context of limerence, it helps us deal with a situation that is often confusing, that is unstable and unpredictable, and it gives us a sense of control over what's going on when we don't fully understand what's going on. It can act like a coping mechanism, both to soothe our own nervous systems and to soothe the anxiety of what is this and where is this going. Using magical thinking to try to steady yourself during a limerent episode that's knocking you off center is nothing to be ashamed of. In fact, magical thinking is often associated with early stress or with trauma and is one way that children cope with chaotic or frightening environments, by telling themselves stories that make the chaos feel less threatening, less random, and, well, less terrifying. It's an adaptation that sometimes follows us into adulthood, especially when we come from complex trauma. But there's something really specific that takes limerence to the next level from regular infatuation. It's not just that you're obsessed, or that your obsession is hurting you, or that you think about this person all day. Lots of crushes can do that. Limerence comes with an extra layer of, let's say, spiritual goop that is poured on top. And it very often sounds something like, this person is my soulmate. Or even better, this person is my twin flame, and they're running away from me because of the runner-chaser dynamics that are part of the twin flame scenario. Or we have a sacred once-in-a-lifetime bond, and this is obviously my only opportunity to have this kind of bond in this lifetime. It's impossible to ever feel this way about anyone else again because of how special and sacred this connection or this person is. And most importantly, all of this comes with the idea that if I walk away from this person, the rest of my life will be gray and pointless, and I'll just be waiting out the minutes until I die. That's what we're calling magical thinking in the context of limerence. It's basically your mind creating a spiritual or a mystical story or a narrative around what is, at the end of the day, an extremely focused and intense psychological and neurochemical state. But without this extra component on top of the crush and obsession, it would be so much easier to let it go. If you didn't truly believe that this person was spiritually different and uniquely matched to you in some fated way, if you didn't even unconsciously believe that your entire life story now hinges on this one human, you'd be able to walk away and go on dating and meeting other people, expecting, and quite reasonably expecting, that you'd be able to find love again. Lots of people break up, start new relationships, and find other partners every day. It's not unusual to leave one relationship and build another. You'd still hurt, you'd grieve the connection, you'd miss the person, but you wouldn't be bargaining with the universe to let you keep this one specific human. People who are deep in limerence will often think some version of, please, just this one person. I don't care what I have to give up or what I have to do. I just need to keep this one. And they genuinely feel that way. This is why limerence can be so destructive. People are willing to give up just about anything for that feeling. But without this sense that this person is it, you'd still have the normal and reasonable hope that you could meet someone else and build another kind of beautiful love with the next person. I think this is what really sets limerence apart from regular crushes. It's not just the intensity and strength of your feelings. It's this extra layer of higher meaning storytelling that says, this particular thing has to be unique. And if I lose this, everything beyond it will be a depressing downgrade. Let's come back to that lightning metaphor, because this is where things get darkly funny and kind of tragic at the same time. Imagine someone standing on a stage giving you relationship advice and saying, good news, you can have a beautiful, ordinary adult life with marriage and kids, shared home, holidays, memories, whatever you imagine as a good life lived with another person. But there's just one condition. First, you have to catch a bolt of lightning in a tiny jam-sized mason jar. That's the only way that you're allowed entrance to this life you've imagined. most of us would call that cruel. We'd say, you can't do that to people. You can't make their entire chance at a normal life depend on something so rare and impossible. That's exactly what this kind of thinking does. This kind of only this kind of limerent electric soulmate feeling counts as real love mindset means. Because functional relationships are not just made up of intensity of feeling. You can have wild intensity and still not have the other pieces that make relationships work in real life. Good relationships are actually a combination of many different factors. Emotional safety, basic availability between people, shared values, mutual effort, timing, boring logistics, and yes, some level of chemistry. And we'd have to overlook another important piece. Having extreme feelings for someone does not guarantee real life compatibility. That's a completely separate question. You can feel like you've been struck by lightning and still not be able to do day-to-day life together, money, conflict, kids, illness, in-laws, stress, without destroying each other. If you zoom out globally, a huge share of long-term marriages were not born from lightning in a bottle at all. Many were arranged or started from practical compatibility, and then affection followed. I'm not saying arranged marriages are secretly happy. They're not. I'm just saying it's a pretty good reality check that lasting partnership is about a lot more than this once-in-a-lifetime high. If you buy this lightning in a bottle story, here's what you're essentially signing up for. First, you have to figure out your weirdly, highly specific recipe for limerence, which is usually some mix of your trauma, your attachment style, your fantasy life, and a particular kind of unavailability or unpredictability. Then you go out into the chaos of modern dating and you try to reproduce that exact recipe with a bunch of strangers. Hope that those strangers are single, emotionally healthy enough, not lying to you, not already partnered, not just love bombing you, and actually into you. Then hope that if you somehow manage to snag each other, the two of you can survive the come down from the high and actually do bills and illness and conflict and Sunday mornings together. That's the plan. That's the plan of switching one limerence scenario for another and calling it a life strategy. You might as well dedicate your whole life to finding the door to Narnia and then at 87 realizing that you've spent your life standing in an empty wardrobe in the same bedroom, in the same house, Narnia nowhere in sight. And you can choose that. That's the beauty and the curse of being free. You are allowed to dedicate decades to chasing this elusive thing. But it's honest to name the price because you're paying it with years of your life, with potential partners who are actually willing, and with your own sense of peace. And your body knows that the stakes feel this high. That's part of why limerence feels so dramatic and apocalyptic. On some level, there's part of you that knows, if I don't lock this down, nothing will ever feel like enough. But sadly, that's not because this person is objectively your one true soulmate out of 8 billion people. It's because your nervous system has stitched a bunch of things together. The high of limerence, the scarcity part of limerence that's been built up around it, and the magical and spiritual narrative into one big, sacred, extremely valuable package. So where does that leave you if this is exactly where you're stuck right now, in this I can't lose my soulmate twin flame kind of thing? I'm not asking you to suddenly stop feeling what you feel. It's difficult to talk down an amped up nervous system out of that state with one neat insight. What you can start doing is just loosening the story and gently noticing when your brain is turning a very intense human experience and human attachment into a life or death prophecy. You have to ask, who is this person really outside of the meaning I'm layering on top of them? There's nothing shameful about magical thinking. For a lot of us, it starts as a way to cope with really hard things. But when it turns into a rule that says that only this level of intensity counts as real love, It stops comforting us, and it starts to very, very much work against us. Because it keeps us from being able to move on and from even imagining a future that could feel full and alive without this one person in it. In a future video, I'm going to focus in on something very closely related to this, the whole spiritual twin flame soulmate tarot ecosystem that often wraps limerence in language about destiny and divine union, and why you need to be especially careful with that kind of content when you're already limerent and vulnerable. Thanks for watching. Until next time.